I think that in my life, when video games were at their peak, has to be around 2011 or 2012. Back then, video games were basically my whole life. I would go to school and then get my homework and everything done, and then just play games until I went to bed, and then wake up and then go to school. That was my life. And those 3 games that I would play on my PS3 are still some of my favorite games of all time. They were Skyrim, Batman Arkham City, and Borderlands 2. The holy trinity. It's crazy that all of these games didn't really come out too far apart from each other. These 3 masterpieces of games came out within the same year or two. This was when video games were peak, dude. Like Arkham City and Skyrim and Borderlands 2, that was my childhood. That was middle school for me. I wanted to make a video talking about how much I love one of these 3 games, but Skyrim is probably the most talked about game on YouTube. There's a YouTuber named Patrician TV who made a 20-hour long video essay on Skyrim, which I have embarrassedly watched the entirety of. And after that coming out, as well as a million other Skyrim video essays, there's nothing to even say about this game that hasn't already been said. Maybe I'll make a Skyrim video essay someday, but I just feel like I would have nothing to contribute to any of it. Then there's Arkham City. Batman Arkham City is considered to be the best superhero video game of all time, if not one of the greatest games of all time. And I think that everybody is kind of aware of how good that game is. Everybody pretty much played it as a kid, and I would just kind of be beating a dead horse, I think, and kind of just confirming what people already know as to why that game is awesome. And then I got to Borderlands 2, and I realized that this would be perfect. I have so much that I want to talk about as far as this game. That's why the runtime on this video is so ridiculous. Like, I don't expect you to watch all of this in one sitting. What I do is just watch YouTube videos every time I eat and then just slowly work through them. I think when I'm eating is the only time I'm really watching YouTube videos. So I recommend you do that. Every time you eat, just watch this video and it'll slowly get finished. Only second to one other game that I have 400 plus hours in that I really should talk about at some point, but just haven't really felt like it. And this game is so big, it's actually ridiculous. Do you know how many DLCs that they added to this game? They added 9 DLCs to this game, and it was already gigantic before. The base game of Borderlands 2 will still take you a dozen plus hours to really complete, and that's if you're gonna play through it up to ultimate vault hunter mode and taking your time, but I'll explain what all of that means later. Just think about that. They added 9 DLCs to this game, and they're all accessible to you when you first start the game. Yeah, you won't be that powerful when you first begin. You're gonna be at level 1, so you're not gonna be anywhere near powerful enough to complete them, but you can go to them and see them. And when you open the game and get to the first fast travel station and see them, it's just damn, you just realize how big this game is. I would say it's bigger than Skyrim. I'd consider it to be an open world game almost. I say 9 DLCs, but it's actually 10 if you include one called Commander Lilith in the Fight for Sanctuary, which came out in 2019. They were still adding DLCs to this game 7 years after it came out. That is insane. So it's actually 10 if you include that one. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the base game for Borderlands 2, as well as the 5 story add-on DLCs, and those are Captain Scarlet's, Torg's, Hammerlock's, Tiny Tina's, and Lilith's DLCs. Now, there's 4 more DLCs that are in something called the Headhunter Pack, and I thought that they were included in the $40 Game of the Year edition that I bought, but when I go in the game and try to fast travel to the locations to start these DLCs, it just brings me to the Steam page where I have to buy it for $5 each. So if I bought all 5 of them, that would be another $25. I thought that they were included in the Game of the Year edition. It said it includes all of the DLCs, but they consider the first ones that I named before as DLCs and these as Headhunter packs. So when they say it includes all of the DLCs, they don't mean it includes these. So I guess we're not fucking seeing them. Now, one common misconception about the Zero lore compendium is, where does the name Zero actually come from? A year or 2 years ago, I had this Discord server, and I remember in the chat they were talking about why I named the channel Zero. The name Zero comes from an old Instagram account that I had when I was 15 years old or 14, and it comes from Zero from Borderlands 2. He was my profile picture, and I was this weird fucking quirky weirdo. So I would use Zero reaction images from Borderlands 2 when I texted people. Now, the character Zero, I'll talk more about him him later, but he has like these emoticon things that he puts on his helmet, like these little emojis. So I had like a screenshot collection in my phone of all of these pictures, and then I would send pictures of Zero with the emoji on his face instead of like actually typing out an emoji, because like I wanted to be like quirky and different. And I never stopped using the name, and that's why like I didn't want to relive those memories. I was so fucking cringe. Imagine there's this dude on Instagram and he has a profile picture of some fan art of Zero from Borderlands 2, and then he sends you a DM that says "Hiya" with an exclamation point, and then with a Zero reaction image of him having like some emoji on his face. That was me. Like it was bad, dude. It was very bad. And what's even crazier is that I was still cringe after I stopped doing that. Just to paint you a picture of like how like fucking dire this was. But anyway, back to the topic of the game. What is this game even about, and what do you even really do in it? In Borderlands, you play as somebody known as a vault hunter. What that basically means is that there was this ancient race of people named the Iridians that lived thousands and thousands of years ago, and inside of those vaults stored money and riches, or crazy weapons or monsters and things like that. And vault hunters are basically these mercenaries that travel the solar system and look for these vaults to just get what's inside. They're like mercenary treasure hunters. So there's a few vault hunters that you can choose to play as, those being Zero, Axton, Salvador, Maya, Gaige, and Kreig. So all of these guys, for different reasons, have found themselves looking for this giant vault on a planet called Pandora that's in a section of the galaxy called the Borderlands, which is this collection of planets that are on the outside of the solar system, where nobody really goes except for mercenaries and bandits and people who have kind of just been kicked out of society. So there's all kinds of stuff on Pandora. There's cities that have been started but just became ruined over time and now are just completely destroyed. There's deserts, there's glaciers and tundras, but it's just not really a place that you would want to live and find yourself in. Now, everything that I just told you was told to the vault hunters before the game started by a man that's called Handsome Jack. This guy is the president of a company called Hyperion, which makes these robots and all of these futuristic weapons and stuff. And him and this whole company have set up shop on Pandora to colonize it and to mine it for this purple mineral called iridium. He's also found out that inside of this vault is this giant monster called the Warrior. So he wants to open up this vault and release the Warrior and then use it to destroy everything on the entire planet so that he can just start over fresh and turn Pandora into some utopia that's under control by the Hyperion company. And he's already made so much progress with this. He made an entire city called Opportunity that I think is the biggest city in the game. And when you have to go here in the main story, it's just so much different than any of the other locations. It's so clean, it's so cleanly, everything's built super uniform. There's maps and stuff to help you get around. There's different landmarks and statues and things. There's different districts and things, and it's still being built and expanded upon. This is what Jack wants to turn all of Pandora into. Handsome Jack is so fucking cool, dude. Like, you don't even know how cool this guy is. I think he's my favorite bad guy in any video game. I also think he has some of the best voice acting in any video game that I've ever played. You don't actually see Handsome Jack in person until you get around 75% through the game, and you learn so much about this guy and become so invested in him without even really seeing him in person until the final stretch of the game, pretty much. You spend more time listening to Handsome Jack talk than any other character in the game because he's just always there. He accompanies you throughout the entire journey, kind of like how Jarvis accompanies Iron Man or something like that, except that he's the villain, and it's just so interesting. And the side quests that he gives you are like fucking ridiculous. He literally gives you a side quest where you have to kill yourself. I'm dead serious.
I will pay you to kill yourself. I've got a perfect spot all picked out for you. And you don't want to? That's fine. Call the Hyperion Suicide Prevention Hotline and you'll get nothing. But if you want a huge reward, you jump off that cliff and become my bitch. Take your time.
And then when you get to the top of the cliff, there's somebody else already there who was also given the same side quest. And he jumps off of the cliff talking about how he's gonna get rich afterwards, even though he doesn't respawn like you do.
I'm gonna be rich!
I guess you just killed yourself. Head back to the bounty board and I'll pay you. But, just one second. No matter what happens, I just want you to remember one thing.
So long as you believe in yourself, nothing
Killed yourself doesn't pay you to.
Except Handsome Jack.
Alright. Off you go.
Video games nowadays are way too sensitive to have the kind of humor that this game had. This game has so many things that just would not slide if it came out today. Like, when have you seen a game recently come out and it has a side quest where the main villain calls you up and says, I will pay you to kill yourself, and then you have to jump off of a cliff and kill yourself? Like people are too sensitive for this. This would not slide today. And that's not even the worst thing. There's so many things in this game that just would not slide, and it's just that Handsome Jack's delivery and his voice acting is just so good, dude. Whenever he goes on a monologue, I just stop what I'm doing and just stand there and listen to it until it's over.
Oh, this is so frustrating. You see, this is what I don't get about you bad guys. You know the hero's gonna win, but you just don't die quickly. Man, example, this one guy in New Haven, right? City's burning, people are dying left and right, yada, yada, yada. This jackal rushes me with a spoon. A freaking spoon, and I'm dying laughing, right? So I scoop out his stupid little eyeballs with it, and his kids are all, wah! And I can't even, he can't see where he's going. He's bumping into stuff, and anyway, I don't know, maybe you had to be there. The moral is, you're a total bitch.
And it's just like, dude, like, he's so cool. You don't even understand how cool he is. I've never seen a character, really, not even just a villain, in any like movie or game that acts like Handsome Jack does. He genuinely thinks that he's the good guy and that we're evil. He sees us as the bad guys the way we see him as the bad guy, and that's why he's so unserious, because he thinks he's the good guy and he's just gonna win because he's the good guy and we're bad. It's so amazing. And in the clip I just showed you, I like how he tells this entire monologue, and then as he's saying it, he kind of realizes it sounds a little messed up, so he's like, oh yeah, maybe he just had to be there. And then he realizes he backed himself into a corner, so he's just like, well, moral of the story is you're a bitch. It's amazing. It's amazing. And sometimes throughout the game, Jack will just ramble on about dumb shit, and he'll keep calling you up about the same topic over and over. Like every 10 minutes or so, he'll give you another call and then kind of continue the topic that he was talking about. And it makes you want to keep playing because you want to hear the rest of his story and kind of like how it's going to conclude. And it really just makes me get this impression that Jack is pretty bored all day, just sitting in his office, and doesn't really have any friends besides all the robots that he's built. So he just fills up his time by calling you and telling you about dumb shit because he's a little lonely.
Hey, how did freckles suck? How's your day been, buddy? We haven't really talked much since I left you for dead. Hey, you think you'll freeze to death out there? Nah, probably not. Bandits will get you first. My day? Been pretty good. Just bought a pony made of diamonds. Yeah, because I'm rich. So, you know, that's cool. Okay, bye. My brain trying to think of a name for that diamond pony I bought. I was going to call it Piss for Brains in honor of you, but that just feels immature. Hey, maybe Butt Stallion? Nah, that's even worse. I'll tell you what, I'll give it some more thought. I should probably clarify. The diamond horse I've been telling you about, it's not a sculpture or anything. It's a living horse that actually happens to be made of. Yeah, actually, I'll go get it. Butt Stallion! Here you go! Butt Stallion! Say hello! Yeah. Butt Stallion says hello.
Now, obviously you beat Handsome Jack at the end of the game, but since there's like 10 DLCs, the game keeps continuing after you beat the main story and defeat him. And on the post-game stuff and all of the DLCs, it does feel a little bit empty without Handsome Jack calling you up every 15 or 20 minutes and telling you about his day and rambling about dumb shit and telling you stories because he's dead. I don't know, it's like he's the bad guy, you're supposed to hate him, but he's just so likable, and it's really easy to miss him after you beat the game and move on to the DLCs and he's not there. Definitely my favorite villain in video games in general. He's just the GOAT. So like I said, there's 6 playable Vault Hunters in the game, and I think it would be a good idea to rank them all on a Borderlands Vault Hunter tier list. I'm not going to rank them based on how good they are. I'm just going to rank them based on how much I like playing them, because if you've watched any type of content on YouTube about this game, you already know which character is the best and which ones are really bad. So instead, I'm just going to rank them based on how much I like them. Now, each Vault Hunter has something called an action skill, which is basically like their ultimate, and it's a unique ability that each of them have. They also have 3 skill trees, so whenever you kill an enemy, you get experience points for it. And when you get enough of those experience points, you level up and get 1 action skill point. And then you use that point to either unlock or upgrade one of these skills in the skill tree. And these skills do things like buff your character and make your action skill more powerful. The Vault Hunters usually have skill trees that follow this format. They have one that makes their action skill more powerful, one that makes them themselves more powerful, and then one that gives them more survivability and like health and shields and things like that. So green, blue, and red. That's how it usually is, but there's a lot of characters that kind of deviate from this. So that's the main formula for it. First one I want to talk about is Zero, since he's the one that I named this entire channel after. He definitely has one of the coolest abilities in the game. His ability is that he turns invisible and then makes a clone of himself. So then all of the enemies think that the clone is still him and don't know that he just turned invisible. So during the 5 or so seconds that the clone is out and you're invisible, you can run around and do things while the enemies are distracted. Now, Zero's skill trees make him really good with either snipers or melee attacks. So he's either super long range or super close range. And it's genius because that action skill ability can complement both pretty much. So it's really your choice of the type of playstyle that you want to do with Zero. You can use his ability and then run around and goob and then set up a sniper shot with the time that the enemies are holding still because they're fighting your clone. You can use the skill and then run around behind them and then melee them in the back for extra damage. And the longer that you stay in this state, the more damage that your next attack does. So it really rewards you for setting up what exactly you're going to do instead of just shooting your gun instantly the second you use it. The only thing I don't really like about Zero, and the reason that I haven't really been playing him that much, is because he really is kind of a glass cannon. He doesn't really have that many skills that help his survivability like the other characters do. So you have this one skill that you can use to kind of get away from everybody's gunfire and hide, but then when the skill is on cooldown, you're kind of just made of tissue paper, and if you get shot a couple of times, you're just going to be low HP. And this is the main reason that I haven't really been playing him that much, even though he used to be my favorite character. Maybe I'm just washed and I used to be better at the game than I am now. But playing Zero, especially in the earlier levels when you don't have a lot of his skills unlocked, can be kind of difficult, to be honest. Especially since early in the game, it's pretty hard to find a good sniper rifle, and your melee doesn't really do that much damage yet. Another cool thing about Zero, and one of the main reasons that I liked him so much when I was like 14, is because he only speaks in what's called haiku, which is this form of Japanese poetry, and he never talks normally. He always just talks like this, and he's like just super mysterious and edgy and like Now obviously haiku poetry originates in Japan, which begs the question, does Japan actually exist in the Borderlands universe? Because humans exist and they speak English, so it would imply that the Earth exists. But then it just raises so many more questions. Like, if Earth exists, then what year is this? Like 3000? 4000? If we have all of these planets and solar systems discovered to the point where there can even be Borderlands? Because the Borderlands is like what? Like 10 planets? So if that's the border, then how many planets were actually discovered? It also really makes you think, if Earth is real in the Borderlands universe, then I wonder how they're doing right now. The way I picture it is that there can only really be 2 states that the Earth is in while the events of Borderlands are happening. Either one, it's some extremely nice paradise utopia, since it's where humanity comes from, like it's ground zero, so maybe it was kept intact as this super nice paradise where humans come from. Or then it's just on the other extreme where it's this barren rock of just dust and sand where all of the resources have just been sucked out of it, and then all of the humans just migrated to other planets or something like that. I feel like just from the way that Pandora looks, it's most likely the latter. I think it's more likely that Earth is just some rock of dust, but I don't know, maybe in a future Borderlands game, if there is one after how dogshit Borderlands 3 was, maybe we'll get to see Earth and see how it's doing. Putting Zero into the Borderlands 2 character tier list because I have like some autistic obsession with tier list. I think I'm gonna throw him into the A tier. Remember, this is ranked on how fun they are to play, not necessarily how good they are, but I think in both of those tier lists he would be an A. I don't know, man, he just doesn't really hit the same like he used to when I was younger. That sounded so fucking bad, but I don't know, he doesn't really He doesn't really like feel the same way as he did when I was younger. All right. I give up. I'm done. Next up, we got Salvador, the Gunzerker. Now, I've heard people talk about this character being broken, but I always thought they were kind of over-exaggerating, or by broken just meant that he was really good compared to the rest of the characters. But no, this is probably the most broken, brain-dead character I have ever seen in any game where you can pick a character to play as. You can, if you know what you're doing and have a basic understanding of how this game works, you can just stand there and hold down left click on your mouse and just complete the whole game that way. Let me begin to explain why this character is such a joke. So Salvador's ability is that he can do something called Gunzerk, which basically just means go into a state where he can regenerate health, regenerate ammo, and dual wield 2 weapons and fire them at the same time. You can already kind of tell how this would get a little bit broken just based off of the fact that you're doing double the damage you would normally be able to do because you can dual wield 2 weapons. So you already have double the damage output that all the other characters in the game have, because you can just hold 2 guns and shoot them at the same time, but they can't. Then on top of that, there's a lot of other guns in this game that seem like they were designed before Salvador was added to the game or something, because they seem like they're not intended to be used alongside another gun because they just break the game. For example, there's a character in this game named Moxie that I'll talk about later, and she has certain like branded guns called Moxie weapons, and these weapons usually have some other effect on top of the fact that they heal you for a certain percentage of health when you damage an enemy with them. Now, the best Moxie weapon is this one called the Grog Nozzle, which you get later in this DLC. It's actually a gun that you just borrow to complete this mission with, and then after you finish the mission, you give the gun back and then you don't have it anymore. But this is such a good gun that people just start the mission to get the gun and then just keep it and never turn in the mission and just have it for the rest of the game. The reason this gun is so good is it heals you for so much health. It's actually insane. It's really easy to regenerate back to full HP completely off of like 2 or 3 shots from this thing. But the downside is that it does basically no damage, and you have to swap to this gun, fire, and then swap back to the other gun, and it can just get kind of annoying and a little bit tedious. But not with Salvador. What Salvador can do is he can just hold this gun in his left hand and then hold down left and right click and shoot the gun he's already going to shoot on top of this one. So he's shooting all the enemies with the Grog Nozzle, and just since he has a lot of skills that increase his fire rate by a lot when he's gunzerking, he can just spam fire this gun like a machine gun and then always keep his health topped off on full HP no matter how much damage he's taking. Now, the Grog Nozzle also has this other effect on top of all that other shit, and this effect makes you what the game calls drunk, which basically means that your weapons fire double the bullets that they normally would. I think it's double, maybe it's triple. So it slows your fire rate down by a lot, but then makes you fire like 2 or 3 times the bullets you would normally fire. Now, usually this is an effect that only applies to the Grog Nozzle, but the thing about Salvador is when he dual wields 2 weapons, the weapon that's in his left hand, the effect of that weapon applies to both weapons that are in his hands. This game has been out for over a decade, so I'm guessing maybe this was like intended because they never changed it or patched it out or anything, meaning that this drunk effect where your fire rate goes down and it doubles or triples the amount of ammo that you're shooting out of your gun applies to the weapon that's in your right hand too. So for the gun that people will put in their right hand alongside of the Grog Nozzle, it's this gun called the double penetrating unkempt herald. So it's this gun that just shoots basically a wall of these explosive bombs, and it just does so much damage, and it's just ridiculous. So this gun, which people call the Deepa for short, it has a prefix on it which is called double penetrating, and when a gun is double penetrating in this game, it means that it shoots double the bullets at one time than it normally would because it has a double barrel. So this combined with the Grog Nozzle's drunk effect means that it's just shooting ridiculous amounts of these explosion bombs at people while you're being healed to full health, and you could just run around and spray these weapons as much as you can and you literally cannot die. It's actually impossible to die while you're holding down left and right click and shooting people with this. Like, look at this footage in the background. It's just ammo everywhere. You can't even see anything. It's just literally a wall of explosion bombs and ammo that once it hits an enemy will refill you back to full HP. It's actually insanity. But it gets even worse than that, right? So a lot of weapons in this game are elemental weapons, meaning that they have some type of element attached to them when you shoot people with them, like fire or electricity or something like that. The element that the grog nozzle has is called slag. The element that the grog nozzle has is called slag, meaning that when you shoot an enemy, there's a chance that you can slag them and turn them purple, which means that they take increased damage from the next shot. So then there's that. You're dealing increased damage to all of the enemies. But there's even more, right? Let's take a look at Salvador's skill tree real quick. Alright guys, so we're in game. Let's take a look at some of Salvador's skills right here. Keeping in mind everything that I told you before about the grog nozzle and the deepa. Now, there's a couple of skills that I want to talk about. The first one is called inconceivable. Your shots have a chance to not consume ammo. The lower your health and shields, the greater the chance of free shots. Which basically just means that you can fire even more bullets before you have to reload and pause. Killing an enemy while gun zerking increases the amount of time you can gun zerk. Shooting an enemy decreases your gun zerking cooldown. And then the last skill on the skill tree called keep firing. While gun zerking, the longer you hold down the trigger, the faster your guns fire and the faster you reload. So this can increase your fire rate by up to 88%. Now, as you can see, I only really maxed out this skill tree because I feel like this is the most important one. I think this might be the most broken skill tree in the whole game. This is just insane. Now, there's a few more really cool skills on this skill tree that I haven't really gotten to unlock yet. The most important one of these is called money shot. The last round fired from your magazine deals massively increased damage. So if you have 10 shots in your magazine, the final shot will just do a ridiculous amount of damage. Now, you can see how this has a blue outline around it, and that means that this skill is being buffed by a class mod that I have. So right here, you can see that this skill gives me +4 to money shot. And like you can see how you invest one of these skill points and it makes this go up by 1 until you max it out. Meaning that if I put 1 skill into this, it would go all the way up to 5. But when you buff a skill like this, it can go past the limit infinitely. So if I bring this to max level, which is 5, then it'll go up to 9. So it'll apply the money shot skill 4 more times than it usually would, which is why, as you can see, I'm working my way through this skill tree to try to get to this skill as fast as I can next. All right, let me show you guys what some Salvador gameplay looks like, just to show you like how broken this actually is. And you can just see it just melts all of the enemies. Now, these enemies are like on level too. Like you can see they're level 33 to like 35 or 36 enemies. So they're on level with me, but they just get obliterated instantly in just a wall of bullets. You don't even have to think. You just hold down left and right click when you see an enemy and they just fucking die. Now some enemies are called badass enemies, which means they're like more powerful variants of enemies, but as you can see, it doesn't even matter. Alright, let's go up to the boss and see how quickly we can just destroy him here. Here it is. Wow, it's just like, wow, and he's dead. What a balanced character, dude. Character is very, very balanced. No complaints. I feel like when they were making this character, they definitely knew what they were doing. So, as you can see, this guy drops a lot of iridium when he gets killed. So you can just come up here over and over again because the bosses in this game... Oh, it's a legendary. Because bosses in this game, like, infinitely respawn. So... you could just come up here and just spray him and just get a bunch of money and iridium and like maybe a legendary weapon if you're lucky. So I guess we'll go in here and spend that point. Just throw it on this, I guess, to try to get here. And yeah, that's Salvador. But I'm still not done talking about how broken Salvador is. We need to talk about the deputy build. I usually just refer to this build as shotgun Sal because it sounds funnier to say, but anywhere you go online, this is called the deputy build. I don't even know if there's a build for the deepa grog nozzle thing that I just showed you. I think that there's not because that's just how Salvador is supposed to be played. That's just Salvador, right? That's not even a build. That's just how he is. That's how broken that character is. Now, there's a gun in this game called the Lady Fist, which is this pistol that has an effect that it does 8 times critical hit damage. So if you hit a headshot or hit some other vital point in this game, it does extra damage, obviously. But with this weapon, instead of doing double damage or triple, I think, it does 8 times. And remember, if you put guns in your left hand as Salvador, the effects for that gun apply to both guns in your hand. So you can put the Lady Fist in your left hand and then put something like a shotgun in your right hand. Then walk up to somebody and shoot them in the face with the shotgun. It will do 8 times critical hit damage on top of being a shotgun, which are, as far as I know, the most damaging class of weapons for a single hit. So the shotgun people usually use is called the Orphan Maker, which is one of the best shotguns in the game, but has the downside that every time you shoot it, it hurts you. But on Salvador, for some reason, if you're gunzerking while using the Orphan Maker, when you shoot it, it actually doesn't deal damage to you. So you can have the Orphan Maker, one of the best shotguns in the game, and then walk up to an enemy and shoot them directly in the face with the Orphan Maker, and it'll do like 700 billion damage. Now, remember earlier I talked about the money shot skill. It makes the last bullet in your magazine do way more damage. I remember I had that class mod that gave it +4. So I have 9 skills into money shot. So it's doing what, like 10, 15 times more damage on the last shot in my magazine, and the Orphan Maker only has 2 bullets. So with 9 points into money shot, a piece of gear called the Deputy Badge that makes shotguns deal more damage when you have it equipped, the Lady Fist in one hand and the Orphan Maker in the other, you can walk up to pretty much any enemy in the game and then 1 or 2 shot them. It's insane that this even made it into the game. Now there's a couple more Salvador builds besides these 2, but I'm not really going to get into those. I feel like we've talked about Salvador enough. Let's just put him onto the tier list. Throwing Salvador onto the Borderlands 2 characters tier list. Remember, this is ranked by how much I like the character, not by how good they are, because if it was ranked by how good they are, he would just go in S tier. But I think that he still goes in S tier anyway. He's just so fun, at least until one-shotting every enemy in the game with the Deputy build gets boring. But then when it does get boring, you can swap over to the Deepa and Grog Nozzle and just spray everything down and it just dies. As easy as he is though, I don't really know if I would recommend Salvador to somebody who's playing the game for the first time, or a friend that you've just gotten into the game and he's going through his first playthrough with you, because in order to make Salvador super broken like you're seeing in the video, it does require some level of knowledge about the game. Like, you have to know about these guns and know about what skills to put into him and actually know how to put these builds together and pull this shit off, and that requires some basic knowledge about the game. Also, Salvador isn't really that good at all when he's not gunzerking. He's actually pretty bad. A lot of other characters have kill skills, which are skills that give you a buff or activate once you kill something, but Salvador doesn't really have any skills outside of gunzerking, which is made a little bit better by the fact that he has a lot of skills that help him gunzerk more often or stay into his gunzerk longer. But when he's not gunzerking, he's actually like one of the worst characters in the game. And towards the beginning part of the game, when you don't have a lot of these skills unlocked and you haven't unlocked the skills that lower the cooldown on gunzerking or make it so that you can stay in the gunzerking state for longer, you're gonna have a little bit of a hard time unless, like I said, you have a little bit of knowledge about the game, because he's only strong when you're gunzerking, and you're not going to be able to access his gunzerk ability as much when you're at the beginning of the game and only have like 3 or 4 skill points to work with. There's a lot of characters who are way better in the early game. Salvador is definitely a character that gets stronger as you play the game, and I feel like he really comes online at like level 30, maybe even level 40, and that's way after you've beaten the game and into New Game Plus or some of the DLCs. That's where he really starts to come online, and it's crazy because that's where a lot of other characters, it starts to get a lot more difficult to play them and they kind of start to fall off a little bit. So Salvador is the most powerful character in the whole game, but it just takes a lot of skill points to get him to that point, and takes a lot of levels, like 30 or 40 even. So the next character I want to talk about is named Axton, and as of right now, this is my favorite character in the game. This is the guy that I mained for the playthrough that I did for this video after not playing this game for like 4 or 5 years. Now, a lot of people say that Axton is the worst character in the game, or one of the worst characters in the game, and I agree with them, but I also think that he's one of the most fun characters. So Axton's action skill lets him throw a turret on the ground, and then that turret shoots at enemies, and that's it. That's his ability. He just throws down a turret and it shoots at people. In the beginning of the game, like during the first couple of hours, the turret actually does a lot of damage to the enemies and helps you out a lot in fights. But the further and further you go through the game, as the enemies start to scale and get stronger and stronger, the turret does less and less damage to them. And this is one reason that I never really liked Axton that much when I would play this game as a kid. I would try him out because I thought he looks cool, which he does. He looks very cool. But then I would throw down one of the turrets and it would do like no damage, and I would be like, wow, this guy is stupid. But now that I'm a bit older and kind of understand this game a little bit more, I see what the point of Axton's turrets actually are. Axton becomes a way better character when you realize that his turrets aren't really supposed to deal damage to the enemy. They're supposed to help you deal damage to the enemy. The main thing that's cool about the turrets is that they draw aggro from the enemies super easily. ability, especially later in the game when you get to the end of his red skill tree, which lets you be able to throw out a second turret. You can just split up the aggro from the enemies and then shoot them while they're attacking the turret. There's also a lot of other super useful skills you can get for the turrets, like this giant bubble shield that can go around it that you can hide inside of, and it's actually immune to damage up to a certain point. So what I found myself doing was taking both of the turrets and throwing them down in front of each other so that I would kind of get a double shield. But I feel like the best way to really play Axton, or the way that I've found the most success with him, is to find some cover behind something, throw the turret out in the open, then leave the cover and then shoot at the enemies while they're shooting at the turret or attacking it. I think Axton definitely looks the coolest. Like, look at him. I have some cosmetics on him. This isn't what he actually normally looks like, but dude, he looks so sick. He's like some dark cowboy or something. He's just fucking dope, man. I feel like out of all of the characters that you can play as in Borderlands 2, Axton is definitely slept on the most. Whenever I watch gameplay of this game, I never see them play as Axton. I never really hear anyone talk about Axton at all when it comes to this game. He doesn't make any kind of appearance in Borderlands 3, and it's like he doesn't even exist or something. I think the main reason why Axton is slept on so bad is because, as cool as I think he looks with a bunch of cosmetics on, at the end of the day, he is just the generic military soldier of the game. If we look at the main roster of the 4 Vault Hunters, not including Kreig and Gaige that were added later in DLC, it's like, alright, we have Salvador, which anybody who looked up or watched anything about this game has heard about and knows how broken he is. We got Zero, who's this weeb samurai edgy ninja guy. Then we have Maya, who is a woman and is pretty. And then we got Axton, who is just like some military dude. So if it's the first time you've ever played this game and you're on the character select screen and you're trying to figure out which character to play based on just how they look, then I feel like Axton is going to be your last choice. And then on top of that, there's the fact that he's arguably the worst out of the 4. I don't even think arguably, I think he just is the worst out of these 4. And all of those things combined is the reason that this guy is so slept on and that nobody really plays him. As far as I know, there's not really that many cool Axton builds that you can make. Axton has a lot of skills that make him good with guns in general, and he has a lot of kill skills that increase his fire rate and damage and reload speed and things like that. So it gets to a point where Axton can basically just be pretty good with any gun you really want to use, to be honest. One cool build, I guess, that you can do with Axton is make a kind of grenade build with him. He has a skill called Grenadier, which gives you an extra grenade. So if you max out this skill, then you'll get 5 extra grenades. And using Iridium to upgrade your grenade slots, you can reach the cap of 16 grenades and then just run around the map and spam fireworks grenades everywhere and just obliterate everything. And that's fun for maybe like an hour or 2, and then it just gets kind of boring and you just want to play the game normally again. I find it funny that I was just talking about how broken Salvador is and all of the crazy shit that he can do. There's even more stuff that I haven't even mentioned about Salvador, like rocket jumping. There's this rocket launcher called the Bada Boom, which has a bunch of recoil on it. So when you shoot it, it launches you in the opposite direction. So you can shoot it down at the ground to launch yourself in the air. So Salvador can dual wield 2 of these and then use them to propel himself around the map fast as shit and reach out of bounds areas and do glitches and crazy stuff. And then I get to talking about why Axton is cool and why I like him better than Salvador. And I'm like, well, you know, he has a skill that lets him have 1 extra grenade. I know it makes him sound like he's super lame, and maybe he is a little bit lame, but something about the fact that he's not super overpowered and just has a basic action skill where he just throws a turret on the ground, it just makes it seem like it's more me playing the game instead of me just using my action skill and my abilities and just destroying the enemies. It's more just me and my guns and my aim and actually using my brain to think what would be a good spot to put a turret down to where it would, you know, shoot at the most enemies as possible. I would say Axton is the character that requires you to try to play the game the most out of all the other characters. I find it crazy that the one character that I never really played as a kid is now my favorite character. The one guy that I never played happens to be the one that I find to be the most fun. Like, if only I would have tried him when I was a kid, maybe he would have been my favorite instead of Zero, and maybe this channel would be called Axton instead. Is there an alternate universe where I tried out Axton before I tried out Zero, and then this channel is called Axton? Because the only reason I never really tried Axton out before was because I would always just play Zero and Salvador sometimes. So because I like them, I would never really play the other characters or really get invested in them because I had already played as Zero and just thought he was the coolest. I find that insane. I find that actually insane. I just realized how wild that really is. S tier. Axton goes S tier. Now, the last of the original 4 characters is Maya. And like, bro, hear me out, right? Hear me out. She just makes me feel some kind of way, man. Just, I can't quite put my finger on what it is, but yeah, I don't know, man. Maya is a siren, which means that she has magical abilities, and her action skill is something called phase lock, which lets her basically just grab an enemy and then raise them up into the air, and then they just get frozen there and they're unable to attack you. So you can just go into a room and phase lock the enemy that might give you the most problems while you either kill him or deal with the rest of the enemies in the room. And obviously this sounds like a really cool ability, but the reason that I never play Maya is because there's so many enemies in this game that are immune to this phase lock ability. Usually it's really large enemies or enemies that are somehow attached to the ground, like threshers or something, where it wouldn't make any sense for them to be raised up into the air. And instead of phase locking these enemies and holding them in place, it just does some damage to them instead. And I don't know the exact percentage, maybe it's like a third. It feels like a third or maybe more of the enemies in this game are immune to phase lock. So it just deals a little chunk of damage to them instead, which is kind of useless. On top of that, Maya has so many skills that only activate when phase lock is active. Like there's skills that increase her fire rate and damage and stuff when there's an enemy being phase locked in the air. So if you're fighting a bunch of threshers or something, or fighting some boss, then you can't activate any of these skills because you have no enemies to use the phase lock on. So I just always found that kind of annoying, and that's why I never really played her. One cool thing about Maya though is she has a skill called Fleet, which raises her movement speed when her shields are depleted. So what people found out you can do is get this shield called the Rough Rider shield, which has 0 capacity. So it'll activate this Fleet skill and you can use it to run across the map super fast. Usually a shield recharges within a couple seconds of it being depleted, so you only really get this quick boost of movement speed. But with the Rough Rider shield, you can just run around the map extremely fast. Also, she's so bad, bro. She's so pretty. Now, those are the 4 characters that came out with the game, but there's 2 more characters that were added afterwards, Gaige and Kreig. Now, Kreig is pretty cool. He's the melee character of the game. He has a weapon called a buzz axe, which is an axe and a chainsaw combined. And he just runs around the map like a madman, just meleeing people. My favorite ability that Kreig has is definitely light the fuse. So normally when you run out of HP in this game, you get downed and you go into a state called fight for your life, where you have to kill an enemy in order to revive yourself. But if you have the skill like the fuse on Kreig, instead a timer shows up on the screen and you're given 2 sticks of dynamite. So the dynamite in your hand explodes when the timer runs out. So you have to run up to an enemy and explode both you and them, that you kill the enemy and then you can come back to life. I have no idea if this is even any better than normal fight for your life. Maybe I'm bad, but it just seems a little bit more difficult to pull this off since the enemies are constantly moving and you have to wait for the whole bar to run out in order for the bombs to explode. You can't just instantly start shooting an enemy the second you get down like you would with any other character. But I think this is definitely the weirdest ability in the game. Kreig's action skill is called Buzz Axe Rampage, and this just lets you bring out the buzz axe and run around like a maniac and throw it at people. Now the thing that's cool about Kreig is if you ever hear his voice lines, he just sounds like a lunatic and nothing that he says ever really makes any sense.
That loader should be strong enough to bust open the doors. Why don't you give him some words of encouragement?
She's waiting for a suckle at the teat of explosion chivalry!
But then at other times, Kreig will talk in a voice that's completely different and a lot calmer and reflect on himself and talk about philosophy and the meaning of life and stuff.
Nice change of pace not to be murdering someone for once. Probably temporary though. I'll lose my mind again and be screaming about meat and fluid soon enough. But this part feels nice.
It's actually because Kreig has 2 identities. There's inner Kreig and then there's outer Kreig. And inner Kreig is just a normal guy. He seems pretty chill actually. But outer Kreig is just a complete maniac. It's like when people are schizophrenic or have some kind of mental disorder and have voices in their head telling them all these crazy things. Except that the crazy voice is on the outside and his calmer normal voice is on the inside. Like it's the other way around. In the game after this, Borderlands 3, you actually get to see Kreig's origin story and how he became like this. And what happened was him and the other psychos, which are an enemy type in the game, were being experimented on by this evil scientist and put through these horrific, painful experiments. So Kreig's mind created this other identity of this crazy psychopath guy as a defense mechanism and to give him the strength to break out, which is cool. But the thing that sucks about it is that it's permanent. Like, that's it. That's just how he is now. And the actual Kreig is on the inside. So he doesn't really have any control over what he says or really does. Actually, I think he does to some point. I think he can reason with outer Kreig a little bit and kind of steer him in a certain direction, but he can't really control his actions. And what's super wholesome is that inner Kreig is in love with Maya. I really can't blame him. But outer Kreig is a lunatic.
She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Tell her she's as gorgeous as 1,000 sunsets. Tell her you need her help. Tell her to rescue you and care for you. And whatever you do, do not scream the word poop at the top of your lungs.
I'm the conductor of the poop train!
It's over, idiot.
It's just so good. He's just so well written. I think he might be the character that they put the most thought into in the game.
Now the rats are arriving. Turn around, Siren. Damn it, turn around or you're dead. Tell her to look back, now.
Strip the flesh!
No, listen to me.
Salt the wound!
Yeah, great. We'll salt all the wounds later. But right now, if you don't listen to me, she's gonna die, and it's gonna be your fault.
Turn around, pretty lady! I'm gonna put my pain into your soul!
Now tell her thank you. Tell her that because of her, we might actually one day be able to act like a normal person again.
I powdered my cockatiel for the ribcage slaughter.
Huh. Close enough.
And it just really makes you feel for him. Like, dude, it must suck to be Kreig, man. I feel so bad for this guy. That sounds like hell, dude. What's really wholesome, though, is that Maya ends up liking Kreig back, and they get into a relationship together. She seems to be the only other character who can understand outer Kreig's crazy ramblings, and who can kind of, in a way, understand what inner Kreig is trying to say on the inside. After the events of Borderlands 2, Maya ends up leaving Pandora to go back to her own planet, but Kreig stays, because in the crazy mental state that he's in, he can't really do any kind of travel, and he's just crazy and unpredictable and doesn't really want to harm anyone. So he stays behind as some sort of protector of Pandora. But later, Maya ends up dying in the most ridiculous death that I'm not even going to talk about because it's going to make me so upset. And in Borderlands 3, you can pick up a voice recording that she left for Kreig, and I remember it making me tear up and cry when I listened to it.
Unjust calamity!
Easy, Kreig. It's okay. You heard what Lilith said. Sanctuary's gone, but we're all still Vault Hunters. Including you.
Booped out by the vengeful Rictus!
You aren't just a psycho anymore. Not to me. Not to any of us.
A knotted gut! 2 knives entwined!
I can't stay. I have to go to Athenas. I left those people defenseless, and I have to know more about what I am. It feels important.
Torn apart from pretty lady.
Don't worry, big guy. I'll be back. I promise.
And she left and never came back. Oh my god, no. She was the only person that understood Kreig, and she's dead. Oh my god. And based on what Maya says to Kreig, you can kind of understand what Kreig is saying. She tells him that he's not just a psycho anymore, not just to her, but to everyone, which has to mean that Kreig must have said that if Maya leaves, then he'll just be a psycho again because nobody else can understand him. Things will just go back to the way they were before. And it's not like, oh my god, like why? It's a looter shooter. It doesn't have to be this sad. But yeah, man, that's Kreig. He has to be my second favorite character in this game next to Handsome Jack. Cause dude, that's just insane. I don't even know what to think about that, man. Now, the final character that was added to the game is named Gaige the Mechromancer. And before I even say anything about this character, I just want to say that the concept of a Mechromancer is such a dope idea. Gaige's ability is that she summons a robot named Deathtrap, like she's summoning some dead Draugr from Skyrim or something. He has these claws that he uses to attack the enemies, and he has like these laser electricity beams, and it just looks so dope. And you can kind of tell that Gaige was the last character that they added to this game because I think her character model definitely looks the nicest, and Deathtrap has some of the best animations in the game. Now, I don't really know much about this character at all because I've never really played her, but I did play her for a little bit to try to learn a little bit more about the character. And one thing that I learned almost immediately is that the AI on Deathtrap is terrible. And I looked into this, and it's not actually just me. People consider Gaige to be the worst character in the game because the AI for Deathtrap is just so bad. The main thing that bothers me is that Deathtrap has two different kinds of attacks. He has a ranged attack where he shoots this little lightning beam, and then he has a melee attack, and then he has a melee attack where he takes out these claws and like punches the enemy. And it's like sometimes he'll only use the ranged attack even when he's super close to the enemies and could just do the melee attack for way more damage. Ranged attack does basically no damage at all. He pretty much just tickles them and staggers them for a second so that you can hit them. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really like Gaige. I don't want to say too much about her because I don't really know that much about the character, and I'm not really the best one to explain her. But yeah, I'm gonna have to put Gaige in the bottom of the tier list. I did not have a fun time playing as her. Alright guys, so we've talked about all of the playable characters in the game as well as some of my other favorite characters, and I think that this is a good place to cut it right here and just have this be a part 1 and make another video later talking about the guns and locations and some of my favorite side quests, because this video is already an hour long and I don't want to make the videos too ridiculously long. But I want to thank you guys so much for listening to me yap about Borderlands 2 for the past hour. I'm going to try to get back to some more movie themed videos talking about movies and flesh out the bad movie tier list a little bit more, and then maybe some other time I'll come back and make the second part to this video. But yeah, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.